You don't hate your job. If you re-honest it as something harder to admit. You restarting to hate the person you re-becoming because of it, and that realization changes everything. You don't actually hate your job. If you re-honest, the work itself might not even be the real problem. The schedule is manageable, the tasks are familiar, the paycheck arrives on time. From the outside, everything looks reasonable. But there's a quiet discomfort that shows up every morning. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just a slow, steady feeling that something inside you is changing, and not in a direction you were proud of. Welcome back to Quiet Thinking. I started noticing this feeling a few years ago. At first, I thought it was just normal frustration. Everyone complains about work sometimes, deadlines, meetings, repetitive tasks. That's part of being an adult, right? But the feeling I had wasn't exactly frustration. It was something subtler. I did feel angry when I woke up. I felt disconnected, like the version of me that existed during work hours wasn't really me. Or maybe worse. Maybe it was becoming me. That realization is uncomfortable. Because saying I hate my job is simple. It puts the blame on the environment. But saying I done like who I am becoming here is different. That makes it personal. I remember catching myself responding to a coworker one afternoon. Not rudely, not aggressively, but impatiently, dismissively. And the strange part was I recognized the tone immediately. It sounded like someone I never wanted to become. Short-tempered, emotionally distant, just trying to get through the day. I sat there afterward thinking, when did this become normal? Work has a quiet influence on us, not just in what we do, but in who we practice being. If you spend most of your waking hours in an environment that rewards speed over thoughtfulness, you start becoming someone who rushes. If your days revolve around constant pressure, you start carrying tension even when you leave the office. If the conversations around you revolve around complaints, competition, or survival, those patterns slowly shape your mindset. None of it happens overnight. It's gradual, subtle. That's why it's easy to miss. You don't wake up one day and say, I've changed. Instead, you notice small shifts. You're more cynical than you used to be, less patient, less curious. You stop asking questions you once cared about, not because you decided to, but because the rhythm of your environment slowly trained you not to. And that's when the discomfort begins. Because deep down, there's still a part of you that remembers who you used to be. The version of you that was more present, more creative, more hopeful, more interested in life beyond the next deadline. When those two versions of yourself start drifting apart, something inside you notices, and the easiest explanation becomes, I hate my job. But sometimes the job isn't the real conflict. The real conflict is identity. The person you're becoming inside that routine no longer feels aligned with the person you want to be. And that creates friction, not loud friction, quiet friction. The kind that shows up as fatigue, as subtle resentment, as the feeling of being emotionally flat by the end of the day. I remember a period where I would leave work and feel strangely numb. Not angry, just empty. Like I had spent the entire day performing a version of myself that didn't fully belong to me. And performance takes energy, even when you're good at it. Especially when you're good at it. Because the better you perform a role, the harder it becomes to notice the distance between the role and the real you. But that distance matters. It shows up in small ways. You stop reading things that used to excite you. You stop pursuing interests that once mattered. You begin measuring your days only in productivity. And slowly your identity becomes tied to output. Not curiosity, not growth, just output. At first, that can feel productive, even admirable. But if you're not careful, you wake up years later realizing you've become someone efficient, but disconnected. And that's a painful realization. Not because you failed, but because you drifted. Drift is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It happens through routine, through small compromises, through telling yourself, this is just temporary. Temporary has a way of becoming permanent when no one interrupts it. Now, this doesn't mean every uncomfortable job situation requires a dramatic escape. Life is more complex than that. Responsibilities matter, stability matters. But awareness also matters, because the goal isn't necessarily to run away from your work. Sometimes the goal is simply to protect your identity while you're there, to notice the habits that are shaping you, to ask yourself small questions like, am I becoming more patient or less patient, more curious or less curious, more generous or more closed off? Work will always influence you, but it does have to define you completely. The danger comes when we stop noticing the influence. When we accept a version of ourselves that feels smaller than the one we once imagined. I had to start asking myself something uncomfortable. If I stay in this environment, what kind of person will I become 5 years from now? Not financially, not professionally. Personally, that question shifted something in me, because careers affect your lifestyle. but they also shape your character, your daily habits, your emotional tone, your worldview, and those things quietly become your life. This isn't about blaming your job. Most jobs are just systems, but systems influence behavior, and behavior shapes identity. The real question is whether you're conscious of that process. If you were listening to this and thinking, this feels familiar, don't panic. You don't need to destroy your life tomorrow. You just need to notice. Notice the patterns shaping you. Notice the attitudes you reabsorbing. Notice the parts of yourself that feel like they re-shrinking. And then protect the parts that matter. Maybe that means setting clearer boundaries. Maybe it means reconnecting with interests outside of work. Maybe it means slowly exploring paths that feel more aligned. Change does always start with a resignation letter. Sometimes it starts with remembering who you are outside of your role, outside of your title, outside of the expectations placed on you, because jobs can shape your time, but they should to quietly erase your identity. The moment you start paying attention to who you're becoming is the moment you regain some control. Not over everything, but over yourself, and that matters more than we often realize. You might not hate your job, but if you hate the person you're becoming within it, that feeling is worth listening to, not with panic, but with honesty, because that quiet discomfort is often the first signal that something important needs your attention. Sometimes the real problem isn't the job, it's who you're slowly becoming because of it. Pay attention to that feeling and protect the parts of yourself that matter. Have you ever felt like your job was changing you? Share in the comments and subscribe to Quiet Thinking for more reflections. This is Quiet Thinking. I'm glad you're here.